Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Adult Child of Dysfunction. Today, we have with us Jason Munson. He is the CEO of Neuro Linkers, and he's got a story, kind of a twofold story, actually, because we were just getting on here before we started, and we were talking about kind of what he's going through or has been through. And he's had adversity from a young child where he had a traumatic brain injury and a bad accident to now raising a child that has what they believe is fetal alcohol syndrome and the complexities that goes along with that. So we could really go anywhere with this conversation. Not sure where it's going to go, but we're going to have fun and hopefully y'all will get something out of it. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been trying to schedule this for a few months actually now, I believe. But
Yeah.
interesting topic actually. I'm going to jump right in and ask you a couple questions about the dynamics of your son because I believe the episode right before yours is also about adoption and
Okay.
some of the aspects of what goes along with that. So you have a different take on it. I mean, everybody gets adopted for different reasons, but you are getting to experience an basically a child of an alcoholic background or generational trauma or whatever it is and what that child is going through. So talk to me a little bit about that, about what it's like.
Yeah. So Brody is now 15 years old. He came to live with us when he was 5. And um, childhood trauma, especially early childhood trauma, is not really highly recognizable when a person's 5 years old, when a kid is 5 years old. So there was just some little oddities about him. He was very often left alone. And so he had developed this defense mechanism of not crying at 5. So he would, any sort of emotion that he would start having, he would quickly wipe his tears away. Um, he was very good at climbing onto the countertops and being able to access the very, very top of the kitchen cabinets, things like that. So, it was just little oddities. We were really glad that he didn't like hoard food. Like he didn't hide food in his bedroom, things like that that often comes, with kids that, you know, don't get fed regularly. So, so we were just kind of working through stuff that seemed fairly normal. But as he grew up and he started getting into his teenage years, we started learning more about like early childhood trauma. So with fetal alcohol syndrome, this is where the most vulnerable time for that is very early in pregnancy. So that's like when you get pregnant, when women get pregnant, they tell them to, if you're drinking, stop drinking immediately, like zero, because that is actually when the baby is most vulnerable to it. And so, I actually called his biological father as we were kind of figuring some of this out in the last year. And and we actually have a great relationship. And I just said, "Hey, scary honesty, what was what was the drinking like?" And he says, "Well, I can remember 2 occasions where she was very drunk after she found out she was pregnant." So um combine that with neglect in those early years. Um you you know we're unpacking this box, as time goes on, and we're learning more about it as time goes on. And so, finding out, oh, okay, we thought this was ADHD. This is not ADHD. This very much, and he works with the therapist and stuff like that. So there's not like a test that you can take that says, oh, you have fetal alcohol syndrome. It's
Right.
more of working on like symptoms and behavior and saying, okay, this really looks like what this is, and the history matches. This looks like what autism is, and it matches, on a spectrum. So when you have a child that's now becoming a teenager, um, and developing ideology around, around his identity, who he is and where he comes from, who was supposed to be there for him that wasn't there for him, and how they showed up in a way um, that was selfish, and not thinking about him. It's like now you have all this stuff going around identity, and you have these needs that were not met for so many years, and all negative behavior. This is, something wisdom I can share with you. All negative behavior, whether adult or a child, is associated with a need that hasn't been met or that is not being met. And so when you have a 15-year-old that his needs were not met, he's developing identity around his self-worth, at 15, it shows up in, these very explosive ways. Add some fetal alcohol syndrome and some autism on top of that, and a desire for freedom. Um, we've really had to, work through some difficult challenges, and I feel like that we've turned the corner in a way, that things are on a stable level, right now, but it has, it has really been life altering, to have taken this challenge on.
Well,
And
I
we
can
got our
only
own stuff
imagine.
to deal with.
Yeah, well, exactly. And we'll definitely get to that for sure. And I can only imagine the challenges because I mean, he's dealing with all kinds of stuff. Like you said, the physiological part of it as far as the trauma that to the brain if your parents are drinking. I know my mother did cocaine when she was pregnant with me, and that does things to your brain. It does things to your DNA. It changes. And then to go through the first 5 years, I don't know exactly how old he was when you had custody of him, but to go through the first
Five,
five
yeah.
years, five. Okay. So to go for those first 5 years before he knows anything and can process anything, and all of those messages being stuck in the back of his brain, and then add on to the fact that there's no matter what, when a child is, and they've proven it, given up at birth or given up at any point. No, I don't want to say given up. I say blessed to someone else. But at the same time, they have that loss and they have that underlying, I was given away. I was not worthy. You know what I mean? Those are like, it's like a triple whammy this kid's going through. So you
Yeah.
can only imagine taking those coping mechanisms, like he was probably told not to cry. I mean, if he's foraging for his own food at the top of the cupboards, then that was a need that was obviously not met. And then also, if he's wiping away his tears, those are definitely telltale signs of growing up in a neglectful household. I mean, definitely without a doubt. So, yeah, I mean, wow. God bless you. And I'm just happy you're making kind of a turn. So because I can only, like I said, triple whammy, perfect storm for a very angry, confused, lack of self child that, you know, and then was that your first child, only child?
No, my biological son is 10 months younger than he is.
Okay.
So my son was 4 years old when Brody came to live with us.
Okay, so talk about some of the things that you've done to make some progress. I mean, was there therapy? I mean, obviously, this child Brody's probably getting in trouble in school and doing all the acting out and the anger and the fights, but talk about some of the steps that you've taken to kind of turn that turn.
Well, homeschool.
Okay,
He's been in homeschool since he finished first grade, and part of the reason why was because he was getting into so much trouble in the classroom. One of his challenges is the lack of impulse control. Of being able to make a connection between his actions and consequences.
right.
So my wife was actually volunteering as a teacher's aide in his classroom one day a week, and he was being, not being held back in class and not being sent out to recess because of his behavior during class. You know, and this is not a choice to be disruptive, and I think that's helpful for people to understand. If you have a child that that is being disruptive, this may not be a choice for them. This is impulsivity, and they're acting without the capacity to think through the consequences, to say, oh, if I'm disruptive during class, I'm not going to get to go out to recess. And in this system of kind of the punitive system that school is and that, our society is, they don't really recognize that. They just say, okay, if you act up, you're going to get this consequence, and that doesn't, it doesn't work so well. And, um, not, gosh, I wish I just go back and do it all over again.
Well,
Uh,
don't beat yourself up because we don't know what we don't know. Yeah, don't I mean, wouldn't it be great to be like, "Oh wow, at 5 years old he was diagnosed as being autistic and now I know why he has these impulsive behaviors and
right.
why he has, rips his clothes off in school because he has a tag on the back of his neck or whatever it is." I mean, it's you so how long was it until they actually said this could be autism?
Oh, just in the last year.
So he was 15.
Yeah, like 14, 15 years old when we're like, oh, wait a second, it was, I think it just became a little bit more manifest when you have a teenager that, you're seeing a person progressing into an adult and you're saying, well, wait a second, as a child, these were kind of little quirks and just maybe, defiance or whatever. But now we're seeing it as, we're seeing it through different eyes. Um, and I'm going back, oh, I wish I was more compassionate. I wish I was more understanding. I wish I knew, more. Like, give me another chance with another kid. I'll rock it.
Oh.
Um, and fortunately, by whatever, grace that there is like, I actually have a good relationship with him through all of, the stuff that we've gone through, together. Like, we've been able to maintain, communication, through it, and been able to have discussions. And now it's like he's starting high school. He's going back to public school for the first time. He's going to start 10th grade in a few weeks. Um, because he really does have a brilliant mind.
Right.
Like, he's he's super intelligent. And homeschool is just not challenging for him. It's just, it's just not where he needs to be for his development. So I don't know. I feel like I got kind of lost on a tangent
No, you're
here.
okay. And I was just asking like what kind of things you did. And now I'm curious as to how are you preparing him to go into the public school after having been homeschooled for 10 years?
Yeah, okay. So part of that is, any, county services, social services, therapy, we live in a small community, so being able to get access to that stuff, you really have to push hard. But however, sometimes when you're dealing like with real extreme behavior, you can actually get more help faster. So with him, he has a disconnect from other people's emotions, so which makes him, I don't want to say dangerous, but because I wouldn't describe him that way, but just he can be very reactive. I'll just put it that way.
I was going to say reactive, and also there with the disconnect with the emotions, there's not that empathy. And
Yeah,
there'll be, he's going to offend people accidentally, not meaning to be offensive, even sometimes, but he's probably very literal too.
yeah. So, yeah. So, and I think we've you know been able. So, okay. So, here's a common thing that happens with kids in this situation. And actually, preparing to go into high school and preparing for life and going into relationship is that it was much easier for him to lie than to tell the truth. Um, and so it like we just fought with this for years and years and years because we would have like most people have chores, right? So we called them jobs because in real life you don't get chores, you get a job. And you don't get paid an allowance from your job, you get paid a commission. So we had jobs and commissions and we had a time card. And there were certain things that he had to do to get his time card signed off. And he would get paid based upon the completion of his jobs, right? So for years, he would on and off get his time card signed off and not have completed his jobs, which is lying. And so within the last year, he's stomping around, he's being miserable. It's like stuff gets taken away, his phone or video games or screen time or any number of things that would get taken away as a result of him lying. And it's like it finally clicked. Like we sat down and it finally clicked, and I'm like, Brody, how much of your life is miserable because you're lying about completing your jobs? Like a light bulb went off on him. And it was like, it's not worth the misery that he was going through. So I'm like, okay, good, getting ready for high school, because it's like if you turn in, you can imagine, if a kid is just chronically lying when he's going into high school with teachers and peers and everything else, like how that's going to turn out. Um, so like fortunately we've gotten through like this chronic lying period. So now so that's one thing, is preparing him for high school, going into 10th grade here at the end of August, is like for the most part, he's pretty honest.
Did
Um,
you ever get to really the root of, does he know why he did that? Is there ever any, I know that's a very common trait, and it's usually a survival tactic for safety when you're a child that's being abused, neglected, or whatever. And then it's sometimes attention, it's a power thing, or it's just wanting that validation. So you just say kind of what people want you to say. But was there ever any talk of why that was a habit?
yeah, we did talk about it, and it's gosh, I don't know if this is relatable. I don't know if anybody else has dealing with this at all, but like I sat down with him one time and really like dove into it, and he truly truly did not want to believe he had a problem with lying,
Hmm.
and this was a daily thing. And like what I think, part of his defense mechanism, part of his survival, is he didn't want to believe it. And so if you don't want to believe you're an alcoholic, then you just keep on drinking, right? The
Right.
easiest way to stay the same is to you know, just deny that there's a problem. And so I don't know like how deep that goes, all the mechanism behind that, of, self-defense, is that it's easier to lie, to lie about something and hope that you don't get caught, that hope that you can get away with it. But we were working with a therapist at the time, and we're finding all this stuff, about what he has, if different conditions, that might be driving his behavior. And so we were actually like, is there an excuse for lying? And his therapist said 100% equivocally, no, there is not. At least with him, it may be different with other kids, but she said absolutely no, not. There is no excuse for his condition and for him to be lying. No, these are choices that he is making. And if he continues to do this, because he's not institutionalized, he doesn't get to live in this bubble away from other people where he's kept safe from the rest of society, you know, unless he makes decisions and goes to prison, which would be the consequence for him lying. So no, he has to resolve this, or this is going to go very bad for him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So I, a lot of work, a lot of prayer of like finally getting through it. And like like it just switched. He found out it was easier. It was easier just to be honest. His life was easier. He liked himself better when he was truthful.
Oh yeah,
And
because even if you're, it doesn't matter what your diagnosis, it doesn't, none of that matters. If you're doing something in shame and you're doing something in guilt, you're not going to like yourself, and it's just going to eat away at your self-esteem even more. Even he knows, he probably every time, like I'm sure at some point he would tell a lie and be like, dang, why did I do that again? And then that's the shame spiral. And that is the spiral that so many people stay in, just even with the growing up with I say crazy parents, but that's not really what I mean. I mean, not, not the non, non their parents, I guess you could say, not
Checked
talking about
out.
you, talking
Yeah,
about his first set.
right.
And that
We
is
call
just a
them.
very,
We
you
have a we have a
do.
we have a name for them. They're called nice dead parents.
They're called what?
Nice dead parents.
Nice dead parents
Yeah, so they put on a smile and they act all happy and everything, but they're really just dead on the inside.
on the inside.
Yeah,
That's
nice
fair
dead
enough.
parents. Yeah.
That's actually a very good way to have described my father, who was a drinker and but suffering his own demons, and you would never have known. So it was definitely emotionally unavailable, basically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so getting to that place of like realization that like truth and honesty were easier than trying to lie and get away with it. And you mentioned, shame and guilt. There's of the emotional spectrum, of negative to positive emotions. So at the very positive level of emotions, you have peace, right? Which is what we all want to attain to. Most people are. All people are trying to attain to peace, I believe. And then at
Yeah.
the very bottom of that scale, you have shame and you have guilt, right down there at the very bottom. Somewhere in between peace and shame and guilt, you have this place called compassion. And so when somebody is acting out in a way that's negative, when they're coming from a place of shame and guilt, and you come from a place of compassion, and you say to that person living in shame and guilt, said, it doesn't really feel good to live here, does it? I'm going to invite you up to above shame and guilt is a place called truth. And I'm just going to invite you to come up here and let's have a conversation about truth. And maybe truth is, how did this lie work for you? How well did it work for you? Did you actually get what you wanted? I mean, you were trying to shortcut so you didn't have to do the chore, the job that you didn't want to do. But once you got found out for it, it actually took longer and it was more painful and you felt this way. So let's just have some truth here about how did this work out for you? And I'm not going to make you right or wrong here. I'm just going to say, I'm going to ask you the question, did it work? Do you feel good about yourself? Well, no. That conversation happening I don't know how many times finally, broke through. So anyway, I'm happy to answer those questions about that, but I actually do want to talk about a little bit about my own journey with this as, as the parent and dealing with my own stuff too.
Yes.
So, but if you had something else you wanted to
No, no,
to
no,
dive
no. Go
into,
ahead. Go
because I
right
know we
ahead.
don't have all the time in the world today, but I have some insights about myself that I've had recently,
Okay. Let's hear them. That's what we're here for.
Right. So I had my own childhood trauma. When I was 5 years old, I fell off of a water slide and suffered severe brain damage. I was put into special education. This is 1985-ish, 1986. What they know about the brain now just absolutely dwarfs what they knew back then. And there was a lot of emphasis on academics, like how well could I read and do math and things like that, but there wasn't much, at least from my perspective, like on the social side, like how did this affect my emotional intelligence? How did this affect my ability to get along with other people? It didn't seem like there was much support on that side. And um so with that, some of the challenges that I have had in life, I can only guess, are these just normal challenges or are these things related to that accident? And so one thing that happened with me is like right, in that transition from adolescence into teenager years, like right around like 12 or 13, I started developing very severe insomnia, just crippling insomnia. And so, over the years, I would, try, different things. And, um, and there just wasn't much help for it. Some studies started to be done in the 2010s, like the Stanford University did a research project on. It was the longest research study that had ever been done on insomnia and on sleep. And they published a book on it. And I read through that book, but it still wasn't it still wasn't super helpful because for people dealing with with severe insomnia, or dealing with insomnia or having trouble sleeping, you really need like professional guidance through this. Uh, and so a few years ago, like I'm like, okay, I'm really struggling with this. So I went to my doctor and I said, okay, I want some help with this. And they're like, okay, well, let's see if you got test positive for sleep apnea. And so they did one sleep study which, they put this thing on my finger and I slept with it and they're testing my oxygen levels. And sure enough, they're showing a drop of oxygen levels, which is a sign of sleep apnea. It's like basically you stop breathing when you're sleeping. And they said, okay, we're going to send you another test for you to do. And so they send me this thing that like goes on my forehead, like straps to my forehead. And they said, well, try sleeping with this thing for 3 nights, So I, put it on for 3 nights, mail it back in. And they call me a couple days later and they say, we don't have enough data. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They said, well, of the 3 nights you were asleep, you only slept for 7 hours of those 3 nights. That's not enough data. I'm like, that's your data.
Yeah, that's your
That's the
data.
data. That is the data. That's how long I slept for. I slept for 7 hours over the course of 3 nights. Help me.
Right.
Never heard back from them. You know, so so then it's like, with so many people, it's like you're figuring out how to survive. So how much alcohol does it take? How much of this supplement, how much of this drug, you start hodgepodging, things together. And for me, it's like sleep turned into this god that if I could just, it didn't matter how I got to sleep, as if I just got to sleep, then, I needed to be able to get up and function throughout my day
Right.
and deal with the needs of my family and to be the provider that I needed to be. My wife homeschools. I'm the sole income for the family. So it's like I'm living in like sleep survival state,
Right.
through all this. And it actually got to a point where you go through variations of it working, not working, working, not working, working, not working. And so finally it got to the point where actually I started a couple years ago, I got introduced to ChatGPT and like how to use it and started getting very good at it, using AI. And so I finally went into AI and said, okay, this is my history. This is what I'm doing right now. And this is what stopped working. What can I do? And it like wrote out the most genius piece of information that I had ever gotten, because it's collecting data from all these different sources and saying, okay, this is what's going on inside of your brain. This is what is happening when you're using this substance or this drug, or when you're drinking alcohol. This is what's going on inside of your brain. You can actually do that. You need a sleep reset. And here is what you need to do for the next 7 days and for the next month,
Wow.
hour by hour.
And it worked?
And it worked.
Wow.
Um, I would say I'm still in a recovery process, but it's like as soon as I started working this program, that a doctor cannot give me. A doctor can't give me this.
Right.
Like it was like all of a sudden, like my brain woke up.
What was do you mind telling me like what were some of the things it entailed? Like you said it was like day by day, hour by hour. Like what are some of the things you had to do that was out of your normal routine?
Um, get up at it was like get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go drink a glass of water with lemon and a pinch of salt and go stand outside and get natural sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, that was the first thing. I live close to Lake Tahoe. I mean, I live in South Lake Tahoe. I live a mile away from the beach.
Right.
So like it was like go jump in the lake for 3 to 5 minutes, do a cold plunge. But you have to do it before 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
Right.
Exercising, daily. But again, it's got to be before 2 p.m. in the afternoon. It was like it's scheduled out. Okay, so when are you getting up? When are you exercising? When are you praying? When are you meditating? When are you eating? Getting this stuff taken care of, first thing in the day. And then later at night, it was like, like my way of winding down was to watch TV until I, couldn't keep my eyes open. And it was like,
Probably not recommended.
no. It's like, okay, so at 8:30 here in Tahoe right now, it's still the sun's still out,
Right.
in the summer. So it's like you're gonna start winding down to go to bed. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. So at 8:30, go get in the hot tub, for 15 to 20 minutes. And when you're gonna raise your body temperature, but when you get out, your body temperature is gonna fall, and that's gonna tell your body that it's time to get ready to sleep. No TV at night, drinking tea, journaling, doing, a meditation, and then like getting in bed and lights out by 10 p.m. I have this really cool thing called a brain tap, which is it's a headphones with a light bar on it, LED light bar connected to my iPhone. And it plays a meditation, and the lights blink really, really fast. But as
Mm-hmm.
the meditation goes on, like the lights start blinking slower and slower, and it starts driving the brain waves to slow down your brain waves so that you can get into a delta pattern of sleep. And for the first night, for the first few nights I did this, I stayed up until 2 a.m. in the morning because that's what I had trained my brain to do.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to essentially rewire my brain, rewire the neurology, the neurochemistry, and the biology of my body, to get into a healthier or to get into a healthy lifestyle, really, so that I can get the restorative sleep at night so that my brain can function during the day like it needs to function so that I can be my brilliance and I can be my genius. I thought my brain was just slowing down because I was just getting older. And it's like, no, my brain's slowing down because of my habits.
Yep.
You
And
know,
that's such an important lesson for everybody out there listening, because I get it. I had a stroke in January, and the very first thing my neurologist said to me was, these are the changes you're going to make. You're going to get out in the sun within an hour of waking up. You're going to take off your shoes. You're going to walk. I mean, she did grounding, she did everything. And it
mm,
was really interesting for a neurologist to be, she's like, you're going to turn off the phone and put it in another room when you sleep. Like, you're not sleeping with that unless you're sleeping with some kind of mechanism, like you said. She's talking about the infrared and all that, but literally she was like, this is what you're going to do.
and it's
And
serious.
it was very serious. And I had the
Yeah.
sleep apnea too, and they said that I was stopped breathing 32 times an hour for an average of 30 seconds or 28 seconds,
Wow.
sometimes for up to 45 seconds. So same thing. I was sleeping. I thought I was sleeping. I was in the bed, but I was not resting, repairing, and recovering at all.
Right. And so this goes back to transfer childhood trauma into adulthood. This stuff it doesn't go away with time. It doesn't heal itself. It doesn't go away by itself. It's corrosive.
Right.
It rusts you from the inside out over time. My wife's cousin, Heather, God bless her soul, never figured this out. By the time she was my age, in her late 40s, she had drunk herself to death. She died of cirrhosis of the liver. It's like this stuff eats us up from the inside out. And fortunately, it's fortunately, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we have more stressors now than we've ever had before to drive us into the ground and to turn us into horrible, awful people, and many of us don't make it. But fortunately, it's like there's more resources there than there
Mm-hmm.
are now. And it's like if we, grab onto these things as as if you want to call us, victims of our childhood, or sufferers from childhood trauma, whatever that is. It's like there's more that we can grab onto now to help us. And there's
Yes.
more people that are willing to be compassionate and to help us, and not to judge us and not to look down on us, but to say, hey, no, I'm with you on this journey. And I am both of those people. I am a person that helps other people with neuroscience and my work with Neuro Linkers and Neuro Change Solutions, of helping people to understand how their brain is wired and how the neurological, biological, what's actually going on inside their bodies through this. But I'm the healer, but I'm also the healee, the person that I also got a hand going like this, needing people to pull me up,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And I think that's the powerful place to be in. And when you get into a community and when you make some friends with people that are like that, then you can support each other.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I agree that the community is one of the most important things. And you're right. Time does not heal.
Mm.
Tools heal.
Yes. I like that. That should be a title of a book. Time doesn't heal, tools heal.
Yep. And we do have access. That's one of the reasons I say I think one of the only things we didn't even know what we were going to talk about today, but I said I want some golden nuggets in there. I want some things people can do. I want to teach people because you don't know what you don't know. And honestly, if you're at a place where you're not living your best life ever, throw anything at the wall that you hear and see what's going to stick. Anything that resonates with you, try it because you have nothing to lose.
Got to go into the unknown. You
Mm-hmm.
got to, when what you know isn't working, you got to go into the unknown, and you got to reach out there. And I think it is acting on faith a lot of times.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, Jason, this has been so much fun. If people want to talk to you, work with you, find out what else you have, where would they go?
All right, so you can go to my website, which is neurolinkers.com. You can look me up on Amazon as well. I've got a great book called Rewire for Calm.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, how to break the cycle of stress and thrive. So Rewire for Calm. If you want to just reach out to me directly and just get on my calendar and have a conversation, about this, I work with businesses and organizations to create thriving, cohesive cultures that benefit all stakeholders and make a positive impact on the world. So I work with organizations, I work with individuals. If you want to have any conversation about that, go to meetwithjason.net and just find a spot on my calendar that works for you. And let's figure out what's going on with you and how we can make some progress.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And for everybody else out there, you heard it. Your brain is it's like Play-Doh. Your brain is literally like Play-Doh. They used to think that when things happened, that was it. That's how you were the rest of your life. I mean, you're sitting here looking at Jason, who had a traumatic brain injury. I mean, he had to rewire, he had to relearn, he had to adapt and change the wiring. And it worked. You're looking at it. So have faith. Know that wherever you are right now, though, that you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. Things happen and you can have your best life ever. Just reach out and be open to the possibility. So thank you all. Love you all and talk to you next week. Bye.